Is this some kind of cosmic joke? I adjusted my ceremonial analyst robes and glared at the event lineup hovering before me. The pristine holographic display confirmed what I'd been dreading all week. The championship bout would indeed feature Krazoth the Destroyer against a human. Let me introduce myself. I'm Vazik Tor, lead combat analyst for the Galactic Combat Federation, with 27 cycles of experience breaking down the finest nuances of interspecies combat techniques. My commentary is broadcast to 87 systems. My combat predictions have a 94.3% accuracy rating. And right now I'm wondering if my career is about to end because of this ridiculous matchup. They're actually going through with it, I muttered to no one in particular as I gazed out from my private observation pod. Below me stretched the grand combat arena of Nexus Prime, a magnificent structure of gleaming quantum-stabilized alloys and gravity-defying architecture. The most prestigious fighting venue in the known galaxy, where only the elite of elite warriors earned the right to compete. The stands were filling rapidly. 200,000 spectators from across the galaxy, their varied anatomies creating a tapestry of colors, textures, and atmospheric requirements in the specialized seating zones. The anticipation in the air was practically tangible. I could taste it through my sensory gills. But this wasn't the usual pre-fight excitement. No, this was the cruel anticipation of watching something so lopsided it bordered on public execution. Vazik, your thoughts on today's unusual championship? I turned to see Grilnik, the obnoxious sports correspondent from the Central Systems Network, his recording drone hovering annoyingly close to my face. My thoughts? I snorted, the sound resonating through my nasal cavities in the way that always communicated elite Zorthan skepticism. My thoughts are that Krazoth will set a new record for fastest championship victory, assuming the human doesn't withdraw when she sees him in person. But this human Maya Blackwood, she's defeated 4 ranked opponents to get here, Grelnick pressed. Pure luck. I waved a dismissive hand. Random chance, perhaps aided by the novelty factor. Her opponents underestimated her because humans are, well, humans. The crowd roared suddenly as the arena lights dimmed. The pre-fight ceremonies were beginning. I settled into my analyst chair and activated my neural recording implants. Welcome, sentient beings of all classifications, to the 394th Grand Championship of the Galactic Combat Federation. The announcer's voice boomed throughout the arena in 17 different languages simultaneously. I prepared my professional commentary face. The one that pays my luxury apartment's gravity bills. Today we witness history. Our reigning champion, the undefeated sovereign of 12 consecutive title defenses, the magnificent apex predator evolved from the battle moon of Drazik Prime Krazoth the Destroyer. The arena erupted as a massive figure emerged from the eastern gateway. Even from my elevated position, Krazoth's presence was overwhelming. Standing nearly 3 meters tall, his 4 massive arms rippling with muscle beneath an exoskeleton evolved to withstand atmospheric re-entry. The bioluminescent patterns across his torso glowed with intimidating pulses of red and orange, the colors of dominance in his species. His championship bone crest, adorned with symbolic notches representing each conquered opponent, caught the spotlight and scattered it like a living trophy. And challenging our champion, the announcer continued, his voice noticeably less enthusiastic, representing the Deathworld classification planet Earth Maya Blackwood. The western gateway opened, and the human female walked out. That's it, she just walked. No dramatic entrance, no intimidation displays, just a bipedal mammalian female of average height for her species, dressed in simple black combat attire. Her only concession to the occasion appeared to be her hair, pulled back in a functional arrangement. The crowd's reaction transitioned from stunned silence to scattered laughter. By the void. I commented into my broadcast feed, not bothering to hide my disdain. We have a Deathworlder who has somehow stumbled through the qualifying rounds. The first human ever to make it past the preliminaries. Though I suspect we'll discover irregularities in those matches when they're properly investigated. As I watched Maya Blackwood stand calmly in the arena, I felt almost sorry for her. No Deathworlder had ever survived a championship match. Most couldn't even survive the preliminary rounds against proper civilized warriors. The betting systems were flashing across my secondary displays. The odds against the human had reached ridiculous proportions, 10,000 to 1 and still climbing. I would have bet my entire career fund against her, but there was no point. The return on such an obvious wager wouldn't even cover the transaction fee. What I didn't know then was that I was about to witness something that would change galactic combat sports forever. As I watched the human stand motionless in the arena, I found myself explaining to my audience what should have been common knowledge. For those of you who haven't kept up with galactic politics, and why would you? It's terribly boring compared to combat sports. Humans have only been part of the Galactic Federation for 15 standard years, I narrated, my voice carrying that authoritative tone I've spent decades perfecting. I remember the day their primitive representatives arrived at the Federation Assembly, soft-skinned, pathetically symmetrical, with just 2 of everything and lacking any natural defenses worth mentioning. Their admission was controversial, to put it mildly. What makes this matchup particularly absurd is that humans come from what we classify as a death world, I continued, calling up relevant data to my neural feed. Earth is categorized as an extreme hazard planet. And not because of advanced technology or evolved apex predators, oh no. It's because the planet itself is actively trying to kill its inhabitants. I chuckled, warming to my subject. Their world features extreme temperature variations that would kill most sentient species. Their atmosphere periodically generates electrical discharge storms. Their planetary crust is unstable, with sections that move and collide. Their large single moon creates tidal forces that reshape their coastlines twice daily. And perhaps most bizarrely, water, yes, corrosive dihydrogen monoxide regularly falls from their sky. The technical director signaled that we had 3 minutes until the match ceremonials concluded, so I turned my attention to the human's biography. Maya Blackwood's presence here is itself an anomaly, I said, reviewing her file. Orphaned during first contact when her parents' research outpost was accidentally vaporized in what the Federation officially termed an unfortunate calibration error during the initial Earth survey. I paused, allowing the audience to absorb the implication. Yes, that's correct. This human was the subject of the famous interspecies adoption case, raised partially among the Nerillian diplomatic corps as a gesture of goodwill. A political curiosity who somehow found her way into combat sports. My secondary display flashed with Krazoth's statistics, and I gratefully pivoted to solid ground. Facing this inexplicable human anomaly is our champion, Krazoth, whose reputation across the quadrant is legendary. Not only does he possess the natural advantages of the Drazconian physiology, 4 independently articulated arms, each capable of exerting enough force to crumple standard starship hull plating, and an exoskeleton rated to withstand military-grade energy weapons, but he's also undergone extensive genetic enhancement. I zoomed my ocular implant to capture Krazoth's pre-fight rituals, the champion dramatically pounding his upper arms against his chest plate, creating reverberations that could be felt even in my private booth. Krazoth's regenerative abilities are particularly noteworthy. During his third title defense, his opponent severed one of his lower arms completely. Krazoth simply laughed, tossed the limb aside, and proceeded to finish the match. By the victory ceremony 2 hours later, the arm had already regrown to 40% functionality. The betting odds flashed across my display again, prompting a derisive snort. The wagering systems have finally stabilized at 10,000 to 1 against Blackwood, which frankly seems generous. I've seen more balanced matchups between a Thorulian star crusher and a navigation beacon. My producer's voice buzzed in my private channel, more on the human, Vazik. Interest metrics are spiking whenever you mention her. I barely suppressed a groan. When Guild Director Parvin first approached me about covering this match, I'd tried to decline. 27 years building my reputation as the premier combat analyst in the Federation, and they wanted me to waste my talents on this farce. There must be someone else available, I'd protested. Director Parvan had fixed me with all three of his eyes. This match is generating unprecedented cross-species interest. Humans may be physically unimpressive, but their media consumption metrics are off the charts. The Federation Council sees potential for significant cultural exchange value. In translation, potential profit. Always follow the credit trail. So here I was, Vaziktor, decorated veteran of the Analysis Corps, winner of 7 Precision Commentary Awards, reduced to narrating what would likely be the shortest championship match in Federation history. At least it would be over quickly. Then I could return to analyzing actual combat between worthy opponents, not watching a Deathworlder's suicidal delusions play out in real time. If only I had known what was about to happen. If only any of us had understood what humans were truly capable of. The pre-fight ceremonials dragged on with the usual tedious protocol. I took the opportunity to mingle with the other VIP spectators in our exclusive observation section, if only to share in the collective amusement at this ridiculous matchup. Bazik, come join us. Ambassador Threx of the Moldovan Confluence waved a tentacle of pertinence in my direction. He sat among a group of high-ranking officials, all nursing exotic beverages served by hovering attendant drones. We're taking bets on how long the human lasts before surrendering. The pool is already at 50,000 credits. I settled into an offered seat, accepting a glass of fermented Zara nectar. Bold of you to assume she'll have time to surrender, I replied, generating appreciative clicks and whistles from the gathered dignitaries. Did any of you actually watch her qualifying matches? Asked a Beltorian trade minister, her crystalline epidermis catching the ambient light. Pure statistical anomalies, everyone. I did, I admitted, remembering the footage I'd studied before the broadcast. In her first match, her opponent slipped on the arena surface. Apparently some maintenance fluid had been improperly cleaned. Her second opponent's exosuit suffered a catastrophic power failure mid-strike. The third had an allergic reaction to something in the arena atmosphere. And the fourth. I paused for dramatic effect, somehow managed to knock himself unconscious by rebounding off the containment field at precisely the wrong angle. The luckiest Deathworlder in the galaxy. Hooted Ambassador Threx, his respiratory sacs inflating with mirth. Luck had nothing to do with it. The authoritative voice cut through our conversation like a phase blade. We turned to see Admiral Pax Jorvik standing at the edge of our gathering. His tall, lean frame was accentuated by the formal Unified Defense Fleet uniform adorned with campaign ribbons and merit insignia. The Admiral was something of a controversial figure in Federation circles. As the military liaison during first contact with Earth, he'd spent more time among humans than perhaps any other high-ranking Federation official. And bizarrely, he seemed to actually like them. I find your dismissal of human Blackwood's accomplishments both premature and uninformed, Jorvik stated, his four-fingered hands clasped formally behind his back. Ambassador Threx's skin flushed a deep purple, the Moldovan equivalent of dismissive contempt. Come now, Admiral. Your fondness for these primitive creatures is well documented, but surely even you can't believe this one has a chance against Krazoth? I not only believe it, Ambassador. I've wagered significantly on it. Jorvik's facial ridges remained perfectly composed, betraying no emotion our species could interpret. Before anyone could respond to this shocking admission of either insanity or financial self-destruction, the arena lighting shifted to the ceremonial pre-combat configuration. We all returned to our designated observation positions. As I settled back into my commentator's chair, I found my attention drawn not to Krazoth's theatrical display. He was currently roaring and smashing his fists together in complex rhythmic patterns designed to intimidate, but to the human. Maya Blackwood stood exactly as she had when she first entered, still, centered, her eyes tracking Krazoth's movements with an unsettling focus. No fear response, no nervous system activation indicators that our sensors could detect. None of the physiological stress markers that even the most disciplined warriors display before combat. Our champion continues his traditional pre-combat dominance display, I narrated for my audience, while the human challenger appears to be doing absolutely nothing. But that wasn't quite right, was it? As I zoomed my ocular implants to maximum resolution, I noticed something peculiar. She wasn't motionless after all. Her breathing followed a precise, controlled pattern. Her weight shifted microscopically in perfect counterbalance to Krazoth's movements, maintaining an optimal center of gravity at all times. What was this? Some strange human ritual? A meditative trance to accept impending doom? For the first time since this farce of a match was announced, I felt a flicker of professional curiosity. The human's composure was irregular, statistically improbable, perhaps even interesting. I checked the countdown timer. 30 seconds until combat commenced. This will be over quickly, I told my audience with practiced certainty. But a small, unexpected doubt had crept into my mind. What if there was something about humans I was missing? The final ceremonial preparations began with typical Federation extravagance. Quantum light arrays painted impossible colors across the arena. Gravitational manipulators created rippling patterns in the very fabric of space-time beneath the combatants' feet. The ancient combat hymn of the progenitor species, allegedly the first to formalize interspecies combat as diplomatic resolution rather than prelude to extinction, resonated through specially designed acoustic chambers. The Grand Combat Arena now initiates the championship protocols. I narrated for my viewers, falling into the comfortable rhythm of ceremonial commentary. As tradition dictates, the combatants will now be formally presented to the Overseer Council. 7 representatives of the founding Federation species materialized on their elevated observation platform. Their presence was largely ceremonial these days, but tradition demanded they witness championship bouts. Champion Krazoth of Drazik Prime, approach and be recognized, intoned the chief overseer, her voice amplified to reach every corner of the massive arena. Krazoth advanced with practiced precision, each footfall deliberate and powerful. Formed the ritual genuflection, perfectly impressive considering his massive frame, and rose again to his full height. We recognize Krazoth, 12-time defender of the championship mantle, the overseer continued. You honor the ancient combat ways. Krazoth inclined his armor-plated head respectfully, then turned to face Maya. The arena's acoustics didn't quite capture what he said to her, but my enhanced audio feeds recorded it for posterity. Your species is soft, human, he rumbled, mandibles clicking in what we Zorthans recognized as anticipatory feeding behavior. I will keep you alive long enough to regret your presumption. The human said nothing. Did nothing, made no gesture of acknowledgement or fear. Human Maya Blackwood of Earth, approach and be recognized, the overseer commanded. Maya walked forward with the same economical movements I'd noticed earlier. She gave the ritual bow simplified for bipedal species and resumed her position. We recognize Maya Blackwood, qualifier through trial of combat, the overseer stated, though I detected a note of doubt in her harmonics. You honor the ancient combat ways. The overseer raised all 4 of her primary limbs. The combatants are recognized. Let the championship combat commence when the signal is given. Victory is achieved through submission, incapacitation, or she paused, as tradition required, conclusion. The euphemism for death hung in the air like a physical presence. Arena attendants quickly cleared the combat space. The protective quantum barrier hummed to life around the perimeter, its translucent surface occasionally rippling with energy discharges, a necessary precaution, given the abilities of some combatant species. Krazoth assumed the traditional opening stance of his fighting style, all 4 arms positioned in complex configurations designed to allow instantaneous offense or defense. His exoskeleton plates shifted slightly, hardening in anticipation of combat. Maya Blackwood stood exactly as before, relaxed, centered, still. We appeared to be witnessing some sort of human combat stance. I improvised, having absolutely no idea what she was doing. Perhaps minimalist in nature. The combat commencement signal floated down from the ceiling, a spherical drone that would emit the traditional starting tone. The entire arena held its collective breath as the drone positioned itself at the exact center point between the combatants. A high, pure note rang out, signaling the start of combat. Krazoth shifted his weight, gathering energy for his opening attack. Maya Blackwood didn't move. Seconds stretched into uncomfortable silence. The crowd's anticipation curdled into confusion. Even Krazoth seemed momentarily perplexed, his attack posture wavering slightly. "The human appears to be waiting?" I narrated, unable to keep puzzlement from my voice. "This is highly irregular. Perhaps a cultural misunderstanding about combat protocols?" Yet something in the human's posture told me this was deliberate. Her eyes remained fixed on Krazoth with unnerving intensity, tracking infinitesimal shifts in his stance. The crowd began to murmur. Some nervous laughter rippled through the stands. Even Krazoth seemed unsure, tilting his armored head in what approximated confusion. "Fight, human!" someone shouted from the stands. But Maya Blackwood stood perfectly still, like a statue carved from flesh, waiting for something only she could perceive. The stillness couldn't last forever. The combat regulations specify that after 30 seconds of non-engagement, officials may compel action. But before that threshold was reached, Krazoth's patience evaporated. "Enough of this," he roared, the translator barely keeping up with his native dialect. "If you will not fight honorably, then die cowering." What happened next was Krazoth's signature opening move, the very technique that had ended 3 championship bouts in the first exchange. Federation combat analysts had named it the quadruple convergence strike. The champion's neurological system allowed him to coordinate all 4 arms in a simultaneous attack pattern that overwhelmed even the most sophisticated defensive algorithms. I sat forward in my seat, prepared to narrate what would likely be the end of the match. Krazoth initiates with his devastating opening sequence, I announced, a professional detachment masking the excitement even I felt at witnessing such a perfect execution of combat art. A technique that combines maximum force projection with unpredictable targeting vectors. The champion charged forward with surprising speed for his mass. His upper right arm cocked back for a skull-crushing overhead blow. His upper left extended for a throat strike. His lower arms positioned for devastating body blows. His armored head lowered slightly, protection against potential counterattacks that never materialized from previous opponents. It was perfect. Textbook. Unstoppable. And Maya Blackwood still hadn't moved. Time seemed to slow as Krazoth closed the distance. 2 meters. 1 meter. Half a meter. "The human appears to have frozen in fear," I narrated, already preparing my commentary on the medical response team's intervention. A not uncommon reaction when facing. What happened next occurred so quickly that even my enhanced perception couldn't fully process it. At the last possible microsecond, when Krazoth's leading strike was mere centimeters from Maya's face, the human moved. But moved is an inadequate description. She flowed, like a liquid suddenly freed from stasis. Her body pivoted slightly, barely enough to avoid the killing blow. Her hands came up not in defense, but in an odd, almost gentle motion that made contact with Krazoth's extended arm. There was no force behind it, no counter-strike, no dramatic technique. She simply redirected. Physics took over. Krazoth's massive body, propelled by his own considerable momentum and strength, suddenly found itself traveling in a trajectory he hadn't intended. His center of gravity shifted past the point of recovery. His secondary arms, rather than providing balance, compound the problem as they continued their programmed strike pattern. The champion's feet left the ground. His massive form rotated through the air in direct violation of what I understood about mass and inertia, and then impact. Krazoth the Destroyer, 12-time champion, genetic pinnacle of one of the galaxy's most fearsome warrior species, slammed into the arena floor with a force that vibrated through the entire structure. The sound was like nothing I'd ever heard in my decades of combat analysis, a combination of exoskeletal plates compressing, internal fluids displacing, and reinforced arena plating absorbing tons of focused kinetic energy. The champion lay motionless, one moment standing, dominant, unstoppable. The next, sprawled on the ground, immobile. Above him stood Maya Blackwood, having pivoted into the exact position she'd need to execute whatever incomprehensible technique she'd just employed. She hadn't even appeared to exert herself. The silence that followed was absolute. 200,000 spectators, from the highest Federation official to the humblest maintenance worker, united in stunned disbelief. My audio feed registered the sound of my own breathing, suddenly loud in the silence. My professional facade cracked. What in the name of the void just happened? I whispered, forgetting momentarily that I was broadcasting to 87 star systems. The human returned to her centered stance, waiting calmly as medical drones rushed toward the fallen champion. I struggled to make sense of what I'd witnessed. It violated everything I understood about combat physics, about the superiority of Krazoth's species, about the limitations of human physiology. Somehow this Deathworlder had just defeated the greatest champion in Federation history with a single, incomprehensible move. And she'd made it look easy. Chaos erupted as the stunned silence gave way to pandemonium. Medical drones swarmed around Krazoth's prone form, their diagnostic beams scanning frantically for life signs. Specialized medical personnel from 3 different species rushed onto the arena floor, emergency equipment hovering alongside them. I struggled to regain my professional composure, aware that billions of viewers were waiting for me to explain what they'd just witnessed. Ladies, gentlemen, and non-binary sentients of all classifications, I began, my voice uncharacteristically shaky. We appear to have witnessed, that is to say, the human challenger has. Words failed me. In 27 years of combat analysis, I'd never been at a loss to explain what I'd seen. The arena's main display showed the medical team's frantic work. Krazoth was alive barely. The readouts indicated multiple internal ruptures, several fractured exoskeletal plates, and some kind of neurological disruption that had shut down his voluntary motor functions, all from a single point of contact. This is unprecedented, I finally managed. The medical team is stabilizing champion Krazoth, who appears to have suffered catastrophic injuries from. I couldn't even describe it. What had she done? It wasn't a strike. There was no energy weapon involved. No technological assistance I could detect. My producer's voice buzzed in my implant. Get down there. Interview the human. But my feet were already moving before the instruction finished. I needed to understand what had happened, not just as a commentator, but as someone whose entire worldview had just been shattered. As I navigated through the confusion toward the arena floor, a firm hand gripped my shoulder. I turned to find Admiral Jorvik, his expression inscrutable as always. Not yet, Analyst Tor, he said quietly. She needs space. What did I just witness? I demanded, professional protocol forgotten. That was impossible. A hint of amusement flickered across the Admiral's features. Not impossible. Just unexpected. He guided me to a quieter observation area as the medical team secured Krazoth for emergency transport. Maya Blackwood stood calmly to the side, occasionally answering questions from Federation officials. It's called Aikido, Jorvik explained. One of many martial disciplines humans developed over millennia of fighting each other. But the physics don't make sense, I protested. Krazoth outweighs her by a factor of 7. His muscular density alone should have made that maneuver impossible. That's precisely what makes Aikido so effective, Jorvik said. It uses an opponent's mass, momentum, and strength against them. The heavier and stronger the attacker, the harder they fall. I stared at him in disbelief. You knew this would happen. I suspected it might, he corrected. I've spent enough time on Earth to respect what humans are capable of. While we were developing energy weapons, they were perfecting ways to fight without technology. While we were genetically enhancing our warriors, they were developing techniques to defeat opponents regardless of physical limitations. I watched as Maya finally stepped away from the officials, her composure never wavering. But Krazoth was the perfect warrior. And that was his weakness, Jorvik explained. Perfection creates predictability. His attacks are precisely calculated, mathematically optimal, and therefore anticipatable. The human didn't need to match his strength. She simply needed to understand his patterns. Are you saying she analyzed his previous matches? Developed a specific counter-strategy? Of course she did, Jorvik replied. Humans lack our physical advantages, so they compensate with obsessive preparation and adaptation. Maya studied every moment of Krazoth's previous fights. She identified the exact neural timing of his attacks, the minute weight shifts that telegraph his intentions. My professional curiosity finally overcame my shock. But surely previous opponents did the same analysis? They tried to counter strength with strength, speed with speed. Maya recognized that was futile. Instead, she chose to use Krazoth's perfection against him. I watched as the medical team finally stabilized the champion enough for transport. The great warrior, reduced to immobility by a single, precisely applied technique. And suddenly I understood the implications. Every combat technique in the Federation was based on direct application of force, whether physical, energy-based, or gravitic. Every defense was designed to withstand or counter such force. What if none of that mattered? What if a physically inferior species had developed a combat philosophy that rendered our advantages meaningless? The betting systems, I murmured. You must have won a fortune. Admiral Jorvik's face remained impassive. I never gamble, Analyst Tor. I calculate. As the reality of what I'd witnessed sank in, I felt a chill run through my primary nervous system. Today's match wasn't just an upset victory. It was a fundamental challenge to everything the Federation understood about interspecies combat. And that meant it was just the beginning. 3 hours after the most shocking upset in Galactic Combat Federation history, I finally secured my interview with Maya Blackwood. The human sat across from me in the post-match analysis chamber, sipping a container of hot water infused with plant matter, a beverage they apparently call tea. She seemed remarkably unchanged by her victory, as if defeating the galaxy's greatest warrior was something she did every day. Congratulations on your unprecedented victory. I began, professional courtesy overriding my lingering disbelief. The entire Federation is wondering, how did you do it? Maya smiled, a human expression involving the upward turning of lip corners that can signify anything from pleasure to predatory intent. I just paid attention, she said simply. Krazoth is an amazing fighter, but he's consistent. His neural patterns create the same micro-expressions before each attack sequence. I just had to wait for the right one. But the technique you used? Aikido, she supplied. It's thousands of years old on Earth. We developed it because we were always fighting opponents bigger and stronger than ourselves. Each other, you mean? I clarified. Maya laughed, another human vocalization with multiple potential meanings. Sometimes, but also predators, environments, diseases. When you come from a death world, you learn to use whatever advantages you can find. But you had no advantages against Krazoth, I pointed out. I had the biggest advantage of all, she countered. He expected to win. I couldn't afford to. It was such a simple statement, yet it contained a perspective entirely alien to Federation combat philosophy. Our warriors are conditioned to expect victory through superior capability. The concept of turning disadvantage into creative adaptation had never been formalized in our combat theories. Will you defend your title? I asked. Another smile, this one containing an element I couldn't quite identify. Absolutely. But I suspect my next opponents won't be so predictable. The interview concluded shortly after, but Maya Blackwood's victory was just beginning its real impact. By the time I returned to my quarters, the story had exploded across every communication network in Federation space. Deathworlder defeats champion. Human fighting technique reveals hidden weakness in superior species. Federation combat paradigms questioned after shocking upset. The headlines screamed across every information feed. I watched as combat theorists, military strategists, and cultural analysts scrambled to explain what had happened and what it meant for interspecies relations going forward. In the days that followed, I produced my most viewed analysis series ever, Deathworld Perspectives, Understanding Human Combat Philosophy. The more I researched, The more I realized that what Maya had demonstrated wasn't a fluke, it was a fundamental aspect of human psychology forged in the crucible of Earth's harsh conditions. Adaptability, resourcefulness, the capacity to study opponents and identify vulnerabilities that they themselves weren't aware of, an ability to turn perceived weaknesses into strategic advantages, and perhaps most disruptively, an unpredictability born from their fractious development as a species. 2 cycles later, enrollment in human combat disciplines increased by 4,000% across Federation space. Military academies rushed to incorporate asymmetric strategy into their curricula. Federation diplomatic protocols regarding Earth were quietly revised to reflect a more nuanced understanding of human capabilities. As for me, Vaziktor, my career reached new heights. I became the Federation's foremost expert on human combat methodologies, a specialization that went from obscure curiosity to essential knowledge overnight. But my commentary fees tripled. I even authored a best-selling analysis text, The Aikido Paradigm Shift. But perhaps the most satisfying outcome, the one I've never admitted publicly until this memoir, is that in a moment of inexplicable intuition just before the match began, I placed a small wager on Maya Blackwood. Not my life savings, as some rumors suggested, but enough that the 10,000 to 1 odds paid for a very comfortable retirement compound on the pleasure moons of Centauri Prime. Sometimes, even a data-driven analyst like myself needs to trust a feeling over statistics. Perhaps that's another lesson we learn from the humans. Sometimes the most illogical choice is precisely the right one. I still occasionally receive messages from Maya Blackwood. She's retired now, after 5 successful title defenses that progressively required less time as opponents grew more cautious. She opened a combat academy that teaches integrated techniques from across the galaxy. Her latest message contained just 3 words: still paying attention. Indeed, I am human Blackwood, as is the entire Federation. We'll never underestimate your species again.